What's up, agents, and welcome back to another Division video. We're going to talk in detail a little bit about the upcoming changes to the watch in Year 7 Season 1. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe, and let's get right into it. Now, I'm probably going to err on the side of caution a little bit with this video because it's very clear that people have some very strong opinions about this, and rightfully so. Everyone's allowed to have their own opinion about it. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the facts. We're going to talk about some information that has come up on X as well, that's kind of additional to what's in the developer notes, which is definitely nice to know for players now. Why we've got up until essentially the 26th, the end of the 26th, because the DLC releases on the 27th, to kind of get ready a little bit. So first of all, let's very quickly look at the scavenging points. So if you didn't know, very quickly, I'm going to summarize all of that right now. And if you want to see it in more detail or hear me talk about it in more detail, the previous video is the video for you. It's essentially what they are going to do is cap out your scavenging points to its max. They're then going to make them account wide, so they then become one-time use only. You're not going to be able to create a new character to refill the watch, but however, along with refilling it back to its max, they're then going to multiply all of the values of the resources by 3, meaning that, you know, if it's 100 now for 1 SHD point, it will be 300 for 1 SHD point, and so on and so on and so on. What isn't clear is if field recon or SHD calibration is included in that. And I don't know yet. Now, I just assumed when it said here, in the short term, what we'll do is multiply the value of the resources you can get with scavenging points by 3. So we're reducing the gap between the old meta and the new system we're creating. Now, last time they made a change for this, which wasn't actually too long ago, they doubled the materials that you get. They left out the field recon and the SHD calibration. So the question is, are they included this time or not? I guess we'll find out soon. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about. There's been a lot of conversation throughout comments and everywhere, basically saying that this is, you know, screwing over veterans of the game, people who played it for a long time. Or again, on the flip side of it, I've seen a lot of comments with people saying that it screws over the newer players and makes things harder for them. Now, obviously, I'm a veteran of the game. I played it for a long time, ever since release, essentially. And I'll kind of give you my take on it a little bit from the takes that I've seen. So for me, obviously, right now, if I want to max out some gear in the new season, I can pretty much make a new character, refill my watch, and that will pretty much give me enough resources to max out any new gear without exotic components. But exotic components are really easy to get right now. Aside from what happened last weekend with the SHD calibration cache, even before that, the amount of events they put on, the now stretch goals and things like that, they're not too hard to come by if you're only upgrading on a seasonal basis. Somebody that's new to the game, though, they will be tight for a good while, but eventually you will get to a point where that eases up as you get, you know, you start to basically beat the game's speed, essentially. You know what I mean? You can upgrade quicker than the game releases, essentially, and that's kind of what happens at the more and more you play, and that would be the same for anything. Now, obviously that is disappointing, but at the moment we can overcap, and that's been a thing for a long time. I've often overcapped on materials so that I can be ready for when a new patch comes out. I can get to max expertise. My expertise was done doing Warlords of New York runs, where you would run a character from 30 to 40 in Warlords of New York as quickly as possible. You know, it used to take like 2 hours, you know, before it got quicker and quicker as the game moved on. Max your watch and spend all the, you know, the resources, the printer filament especially, because that was the best bang for your buck on, you know, your expertise to max it out. But obviously we've moved on since then. We can now level in DC, you can now level in the Dark Zone, and it's become even shorter to some extent. So for me, you know, it's the tripling of the points, the refilling our watch, it's not a huge detriment to me. I am a veteran player. I'm capped on resources now. I can overcap now excessively if I want to, and I'll be okay for a few seasons. And even then, I'll only have to kind of cap out any really good gear that they bring to the game. And when they release new gear to the game, it's how much of it do you ever really want to cap out? Of all the gear that you saw in the PTS last time, apart from optimizing it, how much of it would you really expertise to what will be level 30? And things like that. And it's often not too much, and certainly enough to save up for it throughout an entire season. But I know that I am in a minority. There is definitely other people out there that maybe are veterans of the game and have played a long time, but don't necessarily have the hours that I have in the game. So they're not quite at that tipping point where you're only having to upgrade every season. They still got many builds because of how expensive expertise is. Expertise is very expensive, especially when it comes to field recon that's used for optimization and then also used for expertise. Not only from 1 to 12, it's then continued to be used when they add exotic components from level 12 upwards. It's probably the rarest resource in the game when you get to that point where you have got your flush on exotics. Field recon always runs out. It's incredibly, to me, it's the hardest material in the game to keep, because it's so easy to spend. So you have people like that are not quite there, and they might be feeling a little bit disgruntled by it, but essentially, they're endgame players. They're probably going to run into the same problem as me at some point, that they only have very little to upgrade. And then there's newer players to think about as well. And now they think that, oh, well, all these guys have had this time to, grind these super high SHD watches, and they've been able to have materials for days and upgrade. And that's they're the people I kind of feel sorry for a little bit. I'm over 10k SHD. I have been for a long time. We've seen people at 20k, 30k, 40k. We've seen some huge numbers there. But that's obviously a lot of materials to do these upgrades, that they can constantly regenerate. These people aren't going to have the ability to do that regeneration at all. And that's where I feel like the tripling of the scavenging points is very important. But not only that, further continuing changes like they talk about to maybe lessen the cost as well. Especially if anything happens to expertise, like Yannick said in the live, where they talked about potentially that they're looking at how far expertise goes, so, but expertise might finish here and that might be it. And I think if it becomes much easier for us to grind out, then, everyone will eventually get to that cap as well. And something that I wanted to talk about, and really want to get people's opinions on, the overcapping of materials is something eventually that will run out. We can't regenerate them materials. So the sheer amount of materials that are being generated now, at some point during the game's life cycle, you would expect that people will just naturally use them on creating new builds, on creating new gear, and eventually, slowly but surely they will run out and they'll become on, that even playing field that everybody else is, because newer players will build up the resources and veteran players will lose out, and then you'll all kind of get to that cap at some point. Now, that might not be true for some people. I fully, understand that. Some people might keep resources for years and years to come, being very picky in what they upgrade, and they might stay capped for the rest of the play time, and that is the thing. But I think, and this is where I really want some kind of feedback from you guys down below in the comments. This is kind of an unintended, and I don't really want to call it a glitch, because if it was classed as a glitch, they probably would have clamped down on it much sooner, if that makes sense. But it's definitely been an unintended mechanic from day one. I very much doubt that they expected that the merging mechanic was going to be such an overstacking of materials problem. It was probably put in there for, a quality of life fix for if you when they added the merging your materials option, because that wasn't always an option. That was a newer option that got added later on in the game's life. But then, the unintended thing was that, huge SHD scores that probably weren't around so much at the time then either, can now generate huge amounts of resources. So, that's what's really interesting about this, is that if they capped everybody now, then people would definitely be disgruntled because they put that effort in to, building them resources up. They've done the grind. Now, does that mean that's right or wrong. Well, it's not really something that I really want to judge. I've overcapped myself. I'm very open to saying that. But I overcap for probably different reasons to many people. I overcap so that when gear comes out, I can create content with the gear capped out instantly. And my priorities when something releases is to get it maxed out, and make a video. That's my priority on it. Not necessarily the right priority. The right priority would be to enjoy the game, get the gear as it comes, and upgrade it, as it plays out. But I think what's important to kind of talk about here is that it was left in the game for such a long time. And I think that's where the disgruntledness kind of comes from many corners, from people who don't believe it should ever have been in the game, from people who believe that they should cap it out now and not let people overcap, from newer players that are not going to be able to do it. That's where all of the disgruntledness kind of comes from, I guess, because it's been an unintended mechanic in the game for years and years and years. And I think it kind of became expected that it would just be in there for the rest of our life, of the lifespan of the game. But obviously with the level 40 boost, they could have perhaps handled it a different way. Maybe if you did the level 40 boost, you didn't have access to do it, but that would then be kind of crazy. It sounds like it would end up being a coding nightmare to deal with people who have used the 40 boost, people who haven't used the 40 boost, and could potentially cause, even more issues across the board. So I kind of think that, that's really the source of all the disgruntledness, because, people who are veterans, people who are new players, or people who are not, we've all got that in common. No matter what you think about what is going on, no matter what you think about whether you like the changes or not, that's the one thing we've all got in common. This issue has been in the game for such a long time. So the kind of last thing we need to talk about to kind of round this off, and I can look forward to getting all of your comments down below about it, is that now they're going to refill our watch, then points become insanely valuable because they become one-time use. And I certainly think it's going to make people think twice. Should I go and farm that resource, or should I use my watch that can now run out and I can never regenerate? So they become valuable, them points, all of a sudden. I think I will likely want to farm much more when I get to the point where I'm under cap, rather than use my watch. And then I'll probably be one of them players that sits on his watch forever and never uses it, and I start playing Division 3 and I'll still have a watch that I've never used, just because I'll feel that the watch points are super valuable. But it does bring into account one other thing that we really need to talk about, in that farming these materials needs to be better. It needs to be more interesting. It needs to be more creative. And we don't know what's going to happen with that in year 7. All we know is how we can farm materials right now, but it certainly is pretty hard, even with global events or different caches that we can earn in different ways and projects and things like that. Some of them materials don't come easy. I'm looking at you, Field Recon. So I think that along with exotic changes that they've been very prominent with recently, and that made them much easier to get, I think the whole ecosystem of the economy, and hopefully that this is just the start of changes that they are going to make throughout year 7, is that there's better reasons to play certain content in the game, and then we are rewarded more generously with this stuff, so that we don't have to be reliant on watch points. And essentially that's kind of been the issue all along when you look at it from a top-down point of view. What is the reason why people use this unintended mechanic that's been around for a long time? Because it's the most efficient way to get points, especially when you're at a higher SHD level. You can get all them materials very easily. You can cap a watch out, do all the optimizations in the crafting bench, and max it all out extremely easy. And it kind of always reminds me of that Floor 10 vibe, and when they changed that. Should you really be playing the game to kill a bunch of enemies, to get SHD levels, and to get the best gear in the game, and then killing yourself to reset? That's not really playing the game. Again, it feels like an unintended mechanic. We need reasons to play the game, right? We want reasons to log in like every day. We want reasons to look at my map and go, do you know what? I should go and do this. I should go and do that. And this kind of falls in line with that unintended, what shouldn't be the gameplay loop. Like, playing a character, leveling it from 30 to 40, probably not by yourself, getting your friends to drag you through. Maybe you're running around the DZ and doing landmarks from 30 to 40. But then the unnatural thing comes when you hit 40, you use all the SHD points, and then you delete that character. You know, that just sounds crazy. If you say, what's the gameplay mechanic in that past Final Fantasy MMO that was released? Well, I had to delete a character to progress in the game. It sounds counteractive, right? It sounds very backwards. And although it's, you know, it's very extremely lucrative for people who have used it over the years and years and years, I kind of think that it's probably the right direction for them to go in. I'm hoping that I'm saying that and I look back in a few months' time and I kind of agree with what I'm saying right now. But I think it's very important that, you know, very quickly, not only are they should make this change, they should look at making the other changes as well. Maybe making expertise cheaper, and, you know, optimization is obviously a worry which hasn't been mentioned because that's pretty expensive still. And I think that a way of earning these materials better, I should say, should definitely be on the cards. Anyway, let's come away from that and talk about those overcapped materials that you have got stashed, you material hungry people that are listening to this video, and anyone that's actually still listening to it 16 minutes on, because this is probably the most important information in the video. We're going to flip over to the X page, with the rest of it just being, you know, plain old rant from me that's gone on for way too long. This is ridiculous. This video is way too long. But they said here a couple of things that are extremely interesting. I kind of wanted them to make credits account wide rather than character based or individual, but that's not going to happen. As you can see here, FLG said credits are going to be account wide too. And the Division game was very active today over on X and said no, credit management will not change. So if you've got spur points on your account right now, that's once you've capped out all your materials, putting everything else into money before they actually do this change is probably going to be a worthwhile thing to do. But then if we scroll down a little bit, we can see here that Plum said this. If a player has stacked and exceeded the cap of materials, will they be removed / reduced to the cap of 9999? As points are now account wide. FYI, pick's not me. I'm not that kind of hoarder. Well, I'm not sure I believe you, Plum. That I reckon that could be you. And he's trying to get out of it. But we get confirmation here down below. Hey, no, nothing will happen to them. So all of your overcap materials as of right now are safe. They will be safe going forward. They'll be there forever. You just won't be able to create a watch mule to do it in that way anymore come the 27th of May. And as you can see here, Patrick Wolf as well, would it be possible to get some clarification on whether our overcap stack materials will be lowered to the max cap in the next update? And it says, hi Patrick, nothing will happen to them. So yeah, and that's kind of it, right? There's no other replies there. So I'm going to scroll away just in case there's something that I don't want the video to see, because you never know when it comes to X. So yeah, all good there when it comes to your materials, but I'm definitely interested to see what side of the fence you are on. I essentially think we're all on the same side of the fence. We're all on the side of the fence that something has been in the game for such a long time. It causes problem whether you're an older player, a newer player, a veteran player. It essentially causes problem, you know, whether you think it's an exploit, so you never used it. You don't think it's an exploit, so you have used it, you know, and it's going away. It essentially causes problems no matter where you are, what your opinion is. I think it's essentially the fact that it has been, you know, from a larger, broader overview of looking at it. If you've been in the game a long time, it has been in the game a long time, and therefore it's just kind of become widely accepted that that is the most efficient thing to do. And so people have done it. You know, grinders will grind whatever the most efficient way is of doing something, and this has definitely suffered from that process. Anyway, I look forward to your comments down below in this video, especially if you've watched all in 19 minutes of it. I really love you all if you have. But anyway, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Be nice in the comments. Be nice, right? Let's be constructive. Let's be positive. Let's have a nice conversation, because some of you, I'm watching you. I'm watching you. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.